Let's talk about Iran. This isn't really actually all about Iran. It's more about your money dying in a dystopian world and a receipt economy. Imagine, it's 2026, you walk into a supermarket, everything looks normal. Bright lights, stocked shelves, calm music, hopefully friendly staff. Until you notice one thing changing rapidly. The prices. They're moving. They're not changing daily, but they're ticking by. $4.20, $4.30, $4.50, $5, $5.20, $5.50, $6. And there's a digital counter beside each of the items. A quiet recalibration of value happening in real time. A woman at the till is furious, understandably, not because it's expensive though, but because it changed while she was only standing in line.
This price is ridiculous. It was much lower yesterday. I am not paying this.
In economic news, we can now confirm the reports of inflation's passing are true.
On a screen above the checkout, just like that, right there in real time, prices changing in front of her. But everyone's still saying inflation is under control in this world. Inflation is still ticking at the CPI announced rate of 2% or 3%. And that's when you realize what the problem truly is. Inflation doesn't arrive dramatically
Transaction
anymore.
complete.
It updates
Thank you for
silently.
your cooperation.
And that's the real problem in this world in terms of protecting your savings, protecting your assets, and protecting your future and your loved ones. Because it updates silently. You didn't buy the oil, you bought the bread. Packaging, the fertilizer, the shipping, the refrigeration, the energy, the logistics, the insurance, the financing, the debt, the capitalization. That's what you bought. It wasn't just the petrol at the pump. You bought the entire supply chain because energy is hiding inside all of that. Everything I just mentioned is incredibly energy intensive. And tonight, of course, the headline will say Iran. And we should really spare a thought for the Iranian people. But this isn't just about Iran. It's about your money dying quietly in a system that is dying quietly, in a world that is dying quietly. And by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly where that pressure leaks, where the stress points are, and how to hopefully avoid it, to reposition or to position yourself, and to be anti-fragile in the future. Because have no doubt, this is a threatening world. And here's the threat. A geopolitical spark hits an energy choke point all of a sudden, just like that.
The situation in Tehran is deteriorating rapidly. We are on the brink.
The defense contracts alone guarantee a 20% increase.
And the instability ensures continued growth.
Choke point, pass-throughs, plus the monetary debt saturation equals a world with uncontrollable inflation and the further debasement and erosion of your living standards.
I've dropped the rent.
The public always gets confused because CPI looks stable. The prints read stable, the announcements read stable, central banks sound calm, and the equity market never panics. But the repricing is happening underneath in the basket of goods that aren't included in the basket of goods.
We can now confirm the reports of inflation's demise were not exaggerated. It is officially dead.
And by the time you actually feel it and are living through it, the transfer is already complete and the prices are never coming back again. This isn't about Iran. Iran is the trigger headline. The mechanism is deeper, it's foundational, it's structural, and it's unchangeable. Roughly 20% of all global oil consumption and about 1/4 of seaborne oil trade passes through the Iranian-controlled Strait of Hormuz. Now that's not regional, that's systemic, that's structural, that's a national security threat. Now, layer on top of that the accelerant, which is debt saturation in the Western developed world and the Eastern world. US federal debt, though, is over 36 trillion and counting. Japan's debt to GDP ratio is 240% and ever increasing. The debt servicing cost on the federal debt of the United States is approaching 1 trillion per year, more than the defense budget. Major developed economies are running structurally high deficits, not by accident, but because of necessity. When energy volatility rises, inflation expectations have to also rise. And that's what you see in all of the surveys, that's what you hear around the dinner table, and that's what you hear from your friends. Everything's getting more expensive. Because when inflation expectations rise, something else has to rise. The yields. And when yields rise in a debt-saturated system, the pressure builds. The system does not like that pressure. No one does. So the system does something else. It leaks it. It allows it to release. And it's not the first time it's happened. There are historical parallels like this that exist all through history. Let's talk about one, the 1970s oil shock. Now, yours truly isn't old enough to remember that, but I do remember my parents talking about an oil embargo, crude prices quadrupling, no gas at the tanks, US inflation moving into double digits, Volcker having to come and squash it all. And by the 1980s, the CPI peaked at, get ready, 14%. Can you imagine CPI at 14%? I mean, I'm sure you can, because actually true inflation, the true level of inflation, is probably closer to that right now. Because I don't know about you, but I know a certain basket of goods that have definitely gone up by 15 to 20% in the last few years. Now, the oil shock exposed monetary fragility. It was loose fiscal policy plus energy constraints, which led to stagflation, which is like an economist's worst nightmare, apart from a deflationary economy. And the public all blamed the demon, which was oil, right? The mechanism was monetary saturation meeting supply shock. It wasn't just about the actual energy and the oil. Does that sound familiar to you right now? Well, it should, because this is not about Iran. This is about choke points interacting with huge amounts of leverage, unfunded liabilities, and expectations of a happy, utopian, halcyonic retirement that you probably never see. And by the end of this video, you're probably going to see it, and I hope you do. Let's trace the chain completely cleanly here. The risk event is going to be what always leads to insurance spiking around the world. That's going to mean shipping has to reprice. That's going to mean energy futures are going to reprice and experience high levels of volatility, which then means producers have to bake in that volatility to their own prices, which means the margins are going to compress, which means the consumers are going to be the one who pick up the tab. That's always how it works, and that's how it's going to work again. In 2022, US CPI hit 9.1% year on year. That was the highest in 40 years, and energy prices rose 40% year on year. Now, if you can see that disconnect right there, that explains everything, how bottlenecks exacerbate already underlying inflationary pressures. And the public were all told it was transitory, it's temporary. But it wasn't temporary, it was a regime shift. It's a regime shift that we have not come out of even today. And regime shifts when volatility reprices structurally. Now, we pretend like inflation is a temporary fever, something that we can go to the doctors or go to the pharmacy and get some antibiotics to bring it down. Take some ibuprofen, wait it out, put a cold compress on your head, wait it out. But inflation is more like termites, if I was to use a metaphor. You don't notice it until the actual floor is collapsing beneath you. And by then, obviously, we all know it's too late. Now, the termites were a painful analogy, but if that wasn't enough, we can also talk about when it actually becomes more personal to you. Central banks always have three options. They can cut rates, which obviously fuels the inflation. They can hike the rates, which stresses the debt markets, stresses consumer budgets, stresses mortgage owners and asset owners, or they can hold rates, which compress the growth. And no one really likes the last one. No one really likes any of the ones apart from lowering rates, and for obvious reason. Now, all three of them do have one thing in common. They all transfer pressure. When CPI spiked in 2022, policy rates went from zero in rate environment to nearly 5% in the United States in 18 months. That's the fastest hiking cycle in decades. And they had to do that because they were behind the curve. They didn't remove the pressure though, they just transferred it, and they moved it into mortgage costs, into corporate refinancing, into small business funding, commercial real estate. Inflation isn't just about prices rising. It's about the system having to redistribute all of the stresses. And stresses obviously redistribute wealth, and they make you adjust your expectations. They make you allocate capital differently. They make you spend less on that vacation, if you're going to go on a vacation at all. They make you reassess that purchase of a new house or a new car. And the doctrine It's simple. The financial system quietly transfers pressure and wealth away from you, and where it leaks before the headline is where you can see it first. It's always the same. And if you don't believe me, it's time for another historical parallel. So historical parallel number 2 is all about the 2022 energy and liquidity whiplash. And if you haven't recognized what it was yet, and that we're still living through it right now, you might have been on the receiving end of one of the biggest miscarriages of financial justice. Because in 2022, energy prices were shocked. Inflation surged. Central banks had to hike aggressively. Liquidity drained perniciously. Equities fell precipitously. And the policymakers pivoted tone. I was trying to use an adverb for that one, but I couldn't think of anything that was befitting of policy people shifting, pivoting, other than lackadaisically. But what happened? The markets ripped higher despite still elevated inflation. But why? Why did that happen? Because markets always front run the liquidity. They see where it's going to go, they front run where the money spigot is going to start turning on, and they look where the Cantillon effect is going to make them rich. They don't look at the CPI per se. Yeah, the public, us lemmings, we watch the price, obviously. The system is watching something else though. The system isn't watching the price, it's watching the funding, and it's watching the delta, which means how fast the prices are actually moving and how much people can respond to it and how quickly they can respond to it. So when they're watching funding, if a choke point shock hits today, energy volatility is going to spike first. Inflation break-evens are going to adjust rapidly. Bond yields are going to move. Option volatility is going to reprice, and the equities are going to feel it really quickly. Not immediately, but then all of a sudden. It's how it's going to work. And that's best expressed in the option markets when we're talking about asymmetry and convexity, in terms of how things move, how quickly they move, and the rate of change, like the vol, the derivative of change, right? Inflation shocks are convexity events par excellence. If you were to write a book about inflation events and convexity events, this would be the best example, because they are non-linear. Volatility expands faster than spot prices move. Dealer hedging has to amplify the flows and the swings and the gamma pinning, and everything like that comes along. And it comes along at the worst time. It becomes, when liquidity thins and when it's needed the most. That's when it seems to come along and coalesce and metastasize. And us retail traders, we react to the headlines, obviously. Professionals, though, they position for the regime shift. And that's why this isn't just about Iran. It's about whether you understand the mechanism before it understands you. It's about whether or not you see the tea leaves and how it affects other markets and other areas of geopolitics and what the actual underlying foundational story is. Because it's not just about Iran. Because when repricing begins, it won't announce itself diplomatically or politely. It's just going to leak and then it's going to burst. So once you see it, you don't panic. You reposition, you assess, and you forward think, and you guide yourself into a position that is propitious. Your positioning is going to be all that matters around this event, because it's going to happen suddenly. It's probably going to happen on a weekend. Iran's going to get invaded, but by that time it will be too late to be positioned, because the moves will be violent, cataclysmic, and the accelerant will be prodigious. And that's the difference between being taxed silently and seeing the system before it sees you. So which one are you going to be? Are you going to be the person that waits for it to react? Or are you going to be the person that positions accordingly, that understands that this is never about an individual country? It's never about the Venezuelans. It's never about the Ukraines. It's never about the Russias. It's never about the Irans. It's always about systemic realities, about funding costs, funding pressures, resource gaps, choke points, supply chain issues, national security interests, and those things, as macabre and as cynical as it sounds, can be expressed in your positioning in your portfolio. And it's incumbent upon you to do so, because policymakers aren't actually thinking about you. They're thinking about the system. Sure, you're a cog in the machine, but you're an irrelevant cog in the machine, because on aggregate is all that matters. So when we think about Iran, let's start thinking about the deeper meaning behind it, about what it means for your economy back home, about what it means for your kids' future, about what it means about your energy prices going forward, and quite frankly, what it means about the Iranian people and their freedoms going forward. Because I'll tell you something, this is going to be a cataclysmic change. This could lead to war in the Middle East, or it could lead to the eradication of war in the Middle East. It could lead to regional conflicts with Israel and Iran, or it could lead to a new dawn, a new Pax Judaica, or a new Pax America, where there is actual true peace in the Middle East. In either option, positioning is crucial. My name is Justin Banton. This is the House of Trade. Ciao for now.